Shein and Temu, these are two brands that made a name for themselves by being able to ship directly Chinese goods to U.S. households dirt cheap, really cheap. And so now you're seeing Shein raising prices and Temu putting the import tax right into your cart. This administration closed a loophole that allowed these low-dollar goods to be shipped directly to U.S. households.
I'd love to get your comment on this jobs report that's just come out, because I think it really is stunning a lot of people out there who said, how can jobs be up this much given all of what we were told was a tumultuous stock market and a tumultuous economy over the last couple of weeks?
Right. Well, there's a famous saying that originated with Warren Buffett, that in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine, and in the long term, it's a weighing machine. So when you see a lot of volatility in the stock market, it's a sign that people aren't necessarily sure which way to jump. And it's worth remembering that lots of people on Wall Street make a lot of money, not on betting on the long-term valuations of the company, but instead betting on, for whatever company we're talking about, betting on a particular trading direction. So it's a little bit like if you're handicapping a sports spread or something like that. It's not necessarily important to win or lose. It's important to have an advantage over the spread, to be the smart money and to buy and sell your positions on that basis. So what we could look at is a lot of volatility causing people to shake money out of the system and get on the sidelines because they're just not sure how the strategies they've used for the last 5 years are going to succeed on a forward-looking basis. All of a sudden, maybe long-term valuation has become a bigger player than it had prior. So I'm not a finance professional, but that's my amateurish read from the sides, that at this point, the real economic numbers are going to be much, much more interesting than watching the stock ticker.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I was kind of making a joke the other day when, there are some people, I said, tell me how I know you bought NVIDIA high without you telling me you bought NVIDIA high. Like, I get it, all right? There are certain people that when certain policies are announced, they get very upset about that. But in this profession that we do, the question is, it's not about what affects us directly. It's about what's actually going on in the country. And this is something where, by the way, this idea of onshoring, this idea of providing jobs for the American people, this is exactly what President Trump campaigned on. And, I'm not trying to be a cheerleader here, but I'm pointing out, I'm calling balls and strikes. This is precisely what he said that he would get to work doing. Here we are at exactly 100 days in, and he's got a Trump job boom that is, by the way, it's not something that I'm predicating. It's something that's actually seen in the data. That's what's going on writ large across the country right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, there was a report recently that showed that 25% of Americans would be willing to work in manufacturing. The people who don't like the idea of manufacturing, perhaps they've never had anyone in their family who is involved with direct or primary production, and maybe they just have an email job, so for them it's not appealing, or they don't think it would be appealing. They looked at that number of 25% and said, wow, this proves that manufacturing will never find takers in the American workforce. Thing is, only 8% of Americans currently work in manufacturing. So my friends who do manufacturing were over the moon ecstatic, saying, look how many more people want to come work for us. So this is one of these things where it's very easy to misread the tea leaves from a comfortable berth at a DC desk. There are a lot of real Americans who have, perhaps they or their parents had real production jobs that were sources of pride and that were great options for them. And then when those went away, it's not as though they just sat around unemployed forever, but there's a certain amount of, part-time security guard, gig economy in there. I think there are a lot of people who want to get back to work. And as the United States, I think we've got a huge amount of capital that would love to employ them. It's just a matter of getting the parts right.
Well, and that's actually a great point that you bring up, though. People willing, but also there's a lot of people who don't necessarily have the training or the family experience, because a lot of these jobs, right, this is something that has been lost as we've moved our society more in search of these, elusive, it's the service sector jobs, the service sector jobs, the service sector jobs. I remember first time I heard about that when I was, I think still in college. And we're going to move to a service sector kind of. Said, what does that mean? Who are we serving? What are we producing? What are we actually making? And nobody can ever really explain that to you. And ultimately, it's because there's a hollowing of the society. There is no primary industry. This is something, of course, Vice President Vance talks about all the time because he's literally lived it in a town where they once had a primary vector for their economic activity being factories, or in much of Appalachia, you see mining, of course, coal mines, now, of course, drilling with fracking and the LNG fields in Lake Marcellus Shale out of Pennsylvania, where I'm from. But we really have lost a lot of this. At one point, it was generational knowledge. Now I would even just say it's national knowledge of how to go into this, into these types of fields. And this is going to become an issue as we move back towards it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's if you talk to people who work in, for example, electrical utilities, or if you talk to people who work in various trades, you'll often hear this question: I don't know where the next generation is coming from. I don't know where the continuity is. I know of at least one major engineering college that shut down its power engineering program a few years ago for lack of interest, which is too bad because my son was considering going there to study that. But that sort of took that one off the table when we found out it had been shuttered. I guess I would say there is this discontinuity, and probably the form of manufacturing employment that we would look to see grow in the future would not precisely resemble the mass assembly line labor, I guess, media image or vibe that a lot of people have in their bones or just saw it on TV.